you ever felt stuck, wondering why you can't seem to follow through? Maybe thinking something is wrong with you, and really just wanting to move forward, considering if real change is even possible? Hello, and welcome to Books to Better Your Life. If those are questions on your mind, this is the podcast for you. I'm Anne Brinkman with Better Your Life Coaching. I'm a personal growth book junkie who loves sharing my latest reads with you so you can be inspired to make change in your life. I share my takeaways from a self-development, wellness, or psychology book, then tell you how I put them into practice, and then give you a challenge to take on when you're ready. I also interview up-and-coming self-development and wellness authors to get their take on the best action-oriented and behavior change skills you can use to tackle life's challenges. Ready for change? Let's dig in. Our guest today on Books to Better Your Life is Heather Haigh. Heather is the founder of Aspiring Growth, Inc., where she brings over 25 years of experience helping wealth professionals, leaders, and teams grow strong, service-driven businesses. Before launching her coaching and consulting firm in 2016, Heather spent 18 years at RBC Wealth Management, Canada's top wealth management firm, where she held senior leadership roles including VP of Global Sales Enablement, VP of New Advisor Training, and Head of Diversity for Wealth Management Canada. She's a professional certified coach with the ICF, trained in the neuroscience of coaching, systemic team coaching, and accelerated coach excellence. Her work blends deep industry insight with powerful coaching frameworks to help high-performing professionals lead with purpose, clarity, and heart. Heather is also a speaker, singer, and the author of Living by Heart, A Guide to Discovering Your Harmony Within. She lives in Toronto with her husband, 3 sons, and 2 golden doodles, and brings the same warmth, energy, and humor to her life as she does to her work. Hi, Heather. So nice to see you here today.
And it's a pleasure to be here having this conversation with you today. So thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. And you've recently released a book, Living by Heart. And I'm so excited to explore more about that book today. And as we dig in, I'm curious, what really pulled you to writing a book?
I've been a writer my whole life in some capacity. So whether it was journaling from a young age, I used to write fictional novels in school that I passed around for my friends to read. So I've always had a passion for writing. That part's not new. I think with this book, it was sharing pieces of it along the journey, both in Facebook as written pieces, and also I did a short series of Living by Heart videos through COVID. And the feedback of each of those when I was putting out the content was, when's your book coming? When's your book coming? And so that sort of started the percolating of, when is my book coming? Right? What does that look like? So it really is, I think, 2 things. One, my love of writing, and the other, a request or an invitation from others who seem to have an interest in wanting to hear more from this brief stories that I was sharing along the journey.
I know you touch on this a little bit in the book, but then what really pulled you to be starting to do those Living by Heart videos, those little stories?
Yeah, well, I have 3 core values, and they are inspiration, learning, and connection. And I think with COVID, what started the videos was this desire, especially because I was doing them as Facebook Lives. So people could come on as you were doing it and you could witness their comments in the moment. And it was a way, because we were so isolated, to connect with others, as well as sharing some of the practices I was doing at home to try and regulate my nervous system in an environment of uncertainty, to balance how I was parenting when everything was everyone felt off the rails and all trying to live under one roof. I went from having my whole house as my office to having a tiny little space of privacy with 4 other people at home. And so it really became like, what can I share that is what I'm working on that also might be to the benefit of others that I was connected to through Facebook. So it was sort of filling that desire for deeper connection and the sharing of learnings with people so that maybe they had some tips to navigate. One example would be I did one just about laughing.
Hmm.
And ways to bring laughter into every day in such a stressful environment. And so had a couple of best practices and shared laughing circles. I don't know if you've ever done a laughing circle, but just created that sort of opportunity for people to not take themselves so seriously in a really serious and emotionally charged time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like really birthed out of COVID times.
Certainly the practices, like I started my journey back in April of 2012. So there was a lot of learning from that point to COVID. And what I
Mm-hmm.
found was all of those things I'd been learning along the way suddenly came into this really sharp focus of, wow, like now more than ever, living by heart has become the way to navigate this uncertain terrain. And the way for me to continue to show up the way I wanted to versus showing up how my emotions might, kind of be directing me under the stress and the weight of not knowing. Right. Because I went through a period, especially in those first couple of months, all my work, well, you know this from the book, all the work that I had scheduled for 2020, it was going to be the banner year. And I think many people sort of came into this new decade with a lot of hope and optimism. And then within 3 months, everything had shut down. And so, will my business survive? Will my marriage survive? Like how do we nurture ourselves through this difficult and the uncertainty of it, I think, just made it all the more, because you were like, is it going to be another 2 weeks? Is it going to be 2 years? Is this what our life will look like forever? Was kind of in that spiraling of future tripping that can happen with our minds when we let it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like that time from 2012 to right then really came into use at that point, really.
Yeah, I'd been practicing it all the way along, but certainly at that time period, I was like, wow, I'm so glad I did this work already. Because if I was trying to start doing this work now, that might have been, I had this foundation already in place, and my family kind of already knew that was the work that I was doing, so they could let me be in that without going, what's going on with mom?
How was your family involved in that work you were doing at that time?
It's so interesting. I have 3 sons, and because they were teenagers at the start of COVID already, the communication thread, like, they don't share a lot. You ask, how was your day? And we get fine. So you don't get a lot of information. That said, when I did have the rare opportunity to hear one of my kids talk about me, I could hear them using language that was clearly reflective of what they'd been witnessing. And so it was neat to kind of just hear it back. They would never say it to me because they just don't want to have conversations with your mom at that time. But the way that they were holding themselves and reflecting on things, you could see that it was having an impact, even though they wouldn't say it outright to me. And that was really cool. Like, the one time I think I heard one of them telling their friends about what I did, and just listening to them describe, my mom's a coach and she runs her own business. And you could hear in the way that they were speaking about it, that it wasn't embarrassed that my mother is over the top too much. she's so embarrassing, which you sort of imagine is what your teenagers say about you, right? So it was nice to just sort of hear. I don't want to go so far as to say proud, but the tone of it was, I'm proud to talk about what my mom does, which was a gift that I would never have without COVID. Because why would you be hearing your kids in conversation otherwise, really?
Yeah, that's got to be really, really meaningful to hear it
Yeah.
echoed around you. For the audience who might be just hearing about that idea of living by heart, how would you explain it to them?
I think there's really 2 parts. There's the literal living by heart. So how we connect into our heart, how we listen to our heart. I feel like, especially in the corporate world of North America, we've been very programmed to listen mostly to our heads. What's the logic? What's the facts? Where's the evidence? Right? So much of what we're doing is operating in that above the neck, in the head space, for validation and confirmation and expertise, right? And so just bringing the heart to the conversation, if we were to take it really literally, as one piece of living by heart. And sort of where I started, going inward to understand my heart and connect more with my heart in the beginning. It's evolved, though. And so living by heart, the heart word itself is an acronym for healing, empathy, awareness, resilience, and trust. And so as I was working through my own journey, it became clear that there were pieces of the journey, parts of the work that I was doing that wasn't just uniquely all heart, heart, heart. There were intentional parts of that that fell under those categories. Sometimes I was doing some healing work. Sometimes I was really focused on like what was going on with my ego and how it was getting in the way of who I wanted to be. And other times, especially later in the journey, the awareness of like, how can I trust myself more with everything that I've learned along the way? So each of those pieces evolved over time, and it became more than just putting my hand on my heart and connecting in.
And that idea of connecting to your heart, what does that really mean for you?
Well, I think I'm loving what's happening in the scientific space around this, and understanding that there's more wisdom in our bodies than just in the way that our brain thinks about things. That we have wisdom from our gut. A lot of people talk about the gut brain. And also there's the heart brain. There's a lot of wisdom that comes from our hearts. And in particular, shifting from seeing emotions as something we have to shove down or put in a box or hide behind a door because there's no place for emotions in the workplace. I don't know if those are ever messages that I can see you nodding as we're talking. Like there were messages that I remember receiving of like, never let them see you sweat. Don't cry in public, all those kinds of messages. And emotions are information. If we stop making them good or bad and we just sort of look at what's the information I'm receiving from my emotions, it can tell us so much about what's important to us. If I'm feeling emotional, what is that feeling of emotion telling me that I need to be paying attention to? And I think that that's an important piece. It's an important piece in life and how we interact with our loved ones. It's an important piece in how we interact in the world. It's an important piece in how we interact in business. I think leaders more than anything need to be able to listen to all parts of themselves and not just justifying everything with a pros cons list.
I love that idea of getting information from many places. It's not just our brains, but also our gut and our heart and our emotions.
Yeah, and that's why the subtitle is about discovering the guide to harmony within, because it's bringing all parts of ourselves together. If we think about the gut and the whole body and just how much somatic information we get, our heart information, our head information, if we tune into all those things, and even at a soul level, what is my soul wanting? If you wanted to go to that depth, then we can find harmony within all those parts of us. And then the other piece about parts, you would ask me a question about judger in some of the notes you sent me, and we have all these voices within ourselves too, and we need to find some harmony with that as well, to be able to not beat ourselves up for having different parts of ourselves that communicate different messages. And that's also a heart thing. We come to the compassion for all parts of ourselves. Then we have more grace, and we have a little bit more ease and calm in the way that we're operating. I mean, even as I put my hand on my heart right now, I can feel the frenetic energy of the excitement of this call, this conversation sort of coming into a greater place of calm and groundedness. And the heart does that much faster sometimes than our head can get us there.
Yeah. You mentioned that idea of like heart standing for all those different things. And I love a good acronym. And I'm curious if there were any pieces that were harder to fit into making that beautiful acronym there.
I'm laughing because, when I first started thinking about how would I capture the journey, there were different words like healing. There's definitely been healing work. I've struggled with the word healing, and I talk about that in the book was that the word I wanted to use to really represent what that is, or is there a different word? Ultimately, I've come to the place of recognizing that our own healing work is vitally important to the journey. So that one was probably the one that I was like, do I want to call it that? Right? What does it mean
Mhm.
because I don't see myself as a healing coach per se. I see myself as a leadership coach, a team coach. I work mostly in the corporate space with most of my clients. And so that part was the most challenging to say. If I put that down on paper, might that give me a label that I want to pursue or don't want to pursue? And how do I feel about that? So that was probably the hardest one. The other ones came much more easily. I think empathy is just so alive around us all the time. Like empathy for me became when I see people through the eyes of love, I show up completely differently. Right. So that one was very obvious. Awareness is obvious. The ego work is vital to us making any progress on on ourselves. Resilience was that one wasn't hard to find. It was actually what was harder about it was that section felt so different when I wrote it to the rest of the book. It's vitally important. It just didn't feel with the same energy, and I spoke about that in this section because it was curious to me why that felt different, while at the same time knowing how important us believing in our own resilience and utilizing it and fueling it is. So, yeah, sort of have two answers for that one. Healing and resilience were the ones I probably put a lot more thought about. Do they fit? Are they the right words?
Mhm. Yeah, and that idea of healing and how am I going to be perceived around this, it really brings me to that idea of you are a coach in a corporate environment. And even that idea of looking more at that heart centered side, looking at our emotions. How does that land for your clients in the corporate environment?
Well, I certainly would say not a single one of my clients comes to me saying, Heather, I need more heart centered work. They typically will want to be working on performance. They want to work on leadership skills. They want to work on their team dynamics if it's a team engagement. So they come to the work through performance related, results related skills development. Maybe I hear a lot, I want to feel more confident. I want to work on my confidence or my executive presence. So there are all these things that drive someone to come to a coach like myself. That said, once we start doing the work, the heart is inextricably linked to the rest of ourselves. Even if we aren't listening to it, it's a part of us. And where we sometimes might feel a challenge with someone else, when you get to the underneath of what's going on with that, there's a heart connection in some way, right? There's maybe a value that's out of alignment, or there's some emotions that someone's having difficulty processing because they don't trust a person that they're working with. So the heart is there. It's not overtly there. It's almost covertly there. And so it's bringing to the surface the importance of empathy and the importance of patience and building trust in others and in yourself more. That work surfaces, but no one says, hey, I feel like I need to listen to my heart more.
Yes, right.
Maybe we'll get there. I don't know. 10 years from now, Anne, we might be having a different conversation. But I know that the core skills of leaders today are so much interwoven with what come with the heart wisdom. Leaders are being told that they need to come to the table with more empathy. Leaders are being told they need to come with more active listening, with more awareness and concern for well-being of their employees. Like there's so much that's really heart-centered in the underlying of those skills, what used to be called soft skills, and now we're calling them vital skills, because without them, you can't really be the leader of the 21st century
Mhm,
and the leaders that future generations are going to need from us.
mhm,
So it's not the driver today, but I'm also hopeful that it won't be so rare to say, can we do some heart-centered leadership work?
mhm. Yeah, and I really hear there's starting to be more avenues into it through empathy, through other things that are recognized as positive skills that aren't always framed as emotional or heart related.
And let's be clear, I'm not suggesting that everyone needs to come to work and cry every day. That's not what this is about. When people say, well, if you're using more of your emotions, it's not that that's the goal, is to be more angry or be more emotional, be sadder, express those things overtly in an uncontrolled way. It's to recognize when it's happening and not let it hijack us, because it takes so much effort to try and conceal our emotions. But if you and I are having conflict and I'm feeling really frustrated and there are some tears and I can say to you, these tears are tears of frustration, Anne. We can focus on the issue and move forward. But if I'm sitting there wiping my eyes away and constantly, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cry. And this now becomes, we're now in a conversation about the tears and not about the challenge. So it's inviting that sort of ownership and empowerment to say, my emotions are information and insight that's important to this conversation.
That's a powerful idea. And also a challenging one to, like you mentioned earlier, emotions are not necessarily forefront in the workplace. And that idea of bringing tears in and accepting tears in the workplace, how do you get people on board with that?
I wish there was a magic wand that could say, just do this. It really starts with trusting yourself and getting to the place to say, my tears are like owning them, not in a, and again, this is why I'm saying, like, if someone is hysterically bawling because something tragic has happened, you're probably going to need to give yourself some grace and some time. So if that's the kind of tears we're talking about, then I think it's important to own and say, and in this moment, I could use a few minutes because I'm feeling a lot of emotions, and I think I need a brief break before we can come back to this conversation. So that would be the empowering piece of it. There's no apology for it. There's no like, oh, I wish I wasn't crying. It's just my emotions right now are making it difficult for me to be fully present for this conversation. So I'm going to give myself a break, and I'll come back to you in a few minutes. And I think the other person respectfully will say, that makes sense. Versus saying, ooh, they're unbalanced, or, like, I think we have so many fears around what tears can mean. So it's owning them in a meaningful way, and we stop apologizing for who we are. But it's not to say, let my emotions, let me be mean to people. Like, let's say someone is dealing with they're really frustrated and angry about things. Accepting emotions and acknowledging emotions is not permission for bad behavior. So I want to just make that distinction. Sometimes people will, well, if you just let everyone have all of their emotions, well, then doesn't that just lead to chaos and no one gets anything done? And it's like, no, actually, by me empowering you to feel that it's okay to express what your truth is in that moment, and your emotions are valid. Once you can get yourself to a place of being able to have a productive conversation, we can then address, where do we go from here? And what are the behaviors that need to change? Or what's the accountability that needs to be adjusted? But sometimes when we work so hard to try and manage our emotions, we get caught in them and we can't actually move forward from them. And that's where I talk about, like, I used to run into women. I didn't use the men's washroom. So I can't say that happens in the men's washroom, but I could tell you in the women's washroom, I would run into periodically people crying in there. And sometimes it was me. And why was I in there it was because I believed that was a sign of weakness. And if anyone saw my tears, they would think of me as less of a capable leader. And I remember actually seeing a leader who I highly regarded in a panel. And she said, I told my leader, I cry when I get angry. And I just sat and had this moment and thought, how wonderful to be able to own it and be like, my tears are a reflection of my frustration, my anger, my whatever those feelings are, versus an apology for them. That's what we're really aiming for, is to not necessarily say everybody should be crying all the time whenever they're having a hard time. It's more just to say, just acknowledge that that's information. I'm crying because this really matters to me.
Yeah, I really hear that ownership, and also acceptance of what is. This is a real emotion coming up for me, and we're not trying to pretend it's not happening and ignore it and make things worse by not talking about the elephant in the room.
Yeah. Well, when we talk about authentic leadership, what are we talking about? If people can't actually be able to feel the emotion that they have and take a moment with it and say, I mean, this happens to me a lot now. Someone will ask me a question, and when they ask, I can feel the tears like surface, depending upon what the question, if it's like one that hits my heart. And the first thing that I'll say is, wow, I didn't expect that question to trigger some emotions in me. Interesting, right? Like what's the information that feeling I just had is giving me that I can powerfully use in this interaction?
Feel like your life is wasting away on your phone? Join my 7-day mindful MOBA challenge to reset your phone use. Find it at www.betteryour.life/phone. A couple things really stand out as you share that with me, and it's kind of as like steps to take, like having that question to ask yourself about evaluating it, and also having that phrase to say, like just that preparation ahead can be so helpful in the moment of, I didn't want this to happen, and here we are, and I'm ready for it.
I think when we believe that our emotions are information and we stop assigning good, bad, right, wrong, the sort of black and white labels to it, we will recognize how much wisdom and insights come from our body. Right? Sometimes my head might say, well, that's kind of silly, Heather. That shouldn't really matter. But my emotions are like, but it does. So there's something there. Even if I can rationalize a way that I shouldn't be having this emotion in this moment, my body says, really?
Yes.
Like, okay, you can try and think that logically away, but there's something else going on that's communicating a need for our attention. And I even see this, I'll extrapolate that a little bit further to say, I see a lot of people in the corporate world that are frequently getting sick. And if you tune into your body earlier and you listen to it more often, might there have been things that the body and the emotions were telling you before you ended up having to take a few days off because you got sick? And most of the time, myself included, we can say, yes, there were cues earlier if I only paid attention to them.
Yeah.
I could feel myself getting more emotional than I normally am. What's that telling me? I need more sleep. I'm too jittery from coffee. I don't know. There's lots of things we can go through there, but there's something happening.
Yeah. And that idea of the thinking one thing and your emotions saying something else, a question that came to me around that was kind of the bigger picture of what surprised you most while you were writing or sharing this book?
As I was writing the book, there were two things that surprised me. The first one was, and this one's a little bit more technical, I thought that I understood what the editing process was. So I write my draft, I send it off, the editors are going to work their magic, I'll get another draft, I'll go perfect, and it'll be published. No. From a developmental editor and all the work back and forth on that, and then a technical editor and all the work back and forth, I would say I rewrote that book 4 times. And the beautiful thing of the journey of that was how much it stretched me, how much it challenged me. And with each iteration, I loved the book more. And so that was really cool because I was like, I had this resistance to like, oh God, we're going through this again. But also oh yeah. Each time you went through it, it was like, just that little bit better. Like that a little bit more. And so that totally surprised me, both from a timing and what I thought editing was to what's possible through the editing journey. The other thing that surprised me on the journey was I had to put a lot of my living by heart practices into practice along the way. Because I would find myself in this like, not trusting myself. Okay, I need to go and step into some trust practice right now and sort of come back to what kind of support do I need to continue on? Because it's putting yourself out there. This book is vulnerable. So am I okay putting that in writing? How do I feel about that? What's the purpose of this for the reader? Is this for me? Is this for them? What's for me? What's for that? Like that kind of stuff going on. Yeah. So there was a lot of putting my own learning into practice. I was able to sort of take each of the sections, like the trust in practice as a practice or the healing as a practice, and go, okay, what do I need to be working on as I'm having this experience right now?
Sounds like another level of really digging into the practice.
Yeah, which also was great from a validation standpoint too, because to say like I'm doing these things as I'm writing. It's not just going back to things I did from stories earlier. This is very alive in the now and how it's supporting me in the writing journey, which I think further enhanced the content of the book.
Yeah. And you mentioned that idea of just putting out this book, which is so much based on your own experiences and discoveries and what boldness and bravery I see that it takes to do that. And I'm curious what chapter or idea really felt the most vulnerable or risky for you to share.
It's interesting because I would say for me, my own vulnerability, probably the hardest part. And I think it's because I was being vulnerable, but also keeping in mind like my sister and family members, and was talking about my parents' divorce, like to go there, to put that down on paper, like because it had been something as I wrote in the book, it had been something that had been presented to me as the possibility for why I struggled feeling love from my own family. And I just resisted it so much. So to really go there and get into that and own it and be like that was a moment. It was a significant event. Felt really vulnerable. Interestingly, for the rest of the book, what was more concerning actually was how do I protect the privacy of my kids?
Mm-hmm.
And how do I make sure Jason, who's my husband and who's mentioned a
Mm-hmm.
lot in the book, is okay with the stories I'm sharing, right? That he doesn't feel that it's that there's voyeurism, that me sharing this globally in a book that's available around the world, that it isn't airing out dirty laundry. Isn't it so interesting? Even just thinking about that language, right? You go, well, who's talking right now? Obviously, that's an inner critic. That's a judger in action going, don't air the dirty laundry, right? So yeah, I can hear that voice. But yeah, that was a big thing. And so anytime any of my kids were mentioned or my husband was mentioned, making sure that they read it and they were okay with it. And fortunately, by the time the book was coming out, everybody was an adult age and able to make those choices for themselves. But I really wanted to make sure I honored their privacy and I wasn't making them feel vulnerable from it.
It sounds like you took a really thoughtful approach of protecting the privacy and feelings of the people that you shared about.
Yeah, because there's so much more you can say about your own kids, but you're like, maybe I don't. Maybe that's not. Maybe they put that in their own book as opposed to their mother writing a book about it.
You shared that idea about that judger message, that inner critic message. I appreciated reading those in your book. Something very connecting about hearing someone else's negative voice show up. And I'm curious how you support your clients with that judger voice as well.
Yeah, well, it varies because some clients have done a lot of their own work, and so they come to the conversations already very clearly, right? This is that's my judger, or they have their own language. This is my inner critic. Sometimes we'll name that character, right? This is this is Cruella de Vil. This is whomever, right? So if they are already very conscious of the inner voice or voices, then our work is quite different because it becomes a how do you manage? How do you both honor and step away and find this sort of true inner self or authentic self voice that's going to be in greatest service to you. And then other clients have not done that work at all. And so sometimes in the beginning, it's really you're listening for an opportunity where someone is speaking about themselves negatively to kind of say, who's talking right now? Or whose voice is that when you say that? And that, starts to bring into the consciousness that there is this inner critic, or perhaps in the case, if you're like me, the itty bitty, we'll say crappy committee. Uh, that committee of voices that are all trying to take you off your game. With a new client, I'll introduce the concept of inner critic and just be curious about what has been their experience. Sometimes they haven't noticed it. Although I've never found someone that didn't have any kind of inner judger.
Hmm. They're everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with that idea of transformation and shifting, I know you mentioned in the book that you mentioned not wanting this to be a self-help book, especially that idea of shelf help. And tell me what was most unappealing for you about that idea?
My co-coach and I, we talk about self-help a lot. And I think that there's kind of two aspects of it. So you can get a book that you think is going to help you on your journey, and it's very theoretical. It's lots of concepts. It doesn't really help you put things into practice. And so it's sitting in the self-help section of the bookstore, but you don't get that help. And so we often will refer to that as shelf help. I also, on the flip side, will say for the reader, when you pick the book up, what is your readiness or willingness or desire to really make change? Because you can read a book about diet, or be it a book about exercise, or be it a book about like mine, like coming in and doing the heart work. If you are reading it as I just want to read end to end to take it in, and you don't do any of the work, you're probably going to feel like that was a shelf help book.
Mm-hmm.
But if you come to it and you're open and you're saying, I really want to take something from this, right? I want to change my diet, or I want to change how I'm exercising, or I want to change how I'm connecting in with the inner parts of myself, then you slowly digest that reading and you do the practices and you see it come into shape and you get some results from it. And then, so that's really what, when they said, is this a self-help book? The publishers, when I was working with FemPower Publishing, who are fantastic publishers, said, is this or a self-help book? I had some resistance and I said, well, I think that it's a self-coaching book, right? So if you're ready to do some self-coaching, the book is a supportive guide for you on that journey, and you'll get great value from it. If you come to it the way we might read, I just want to learn about a concept and flip through the pages, you might come out at the end and go, that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Next.
Yeah. Yeah. I really relate to that idea because I love reading personal growth, self-help, however you want to call them. I love those books. And honestly, that was a little bit of the origin of this podcast at all, was both me wanting to share these books with my clients in more condensed form, but also for myself of like, well, I really like this book. And yet I read it and then moved on and didn't really embody the principles. And so often I'm trying to put a challenge in the podcast for our listeners or myself to really take it a step further and not just consume, also put to practice.
Yeah. Well, I love that you're doing that work and bringing that to your audience, because I think that it is that invitation. Like, if you're going to take the time to read the book, what are you wanting from that experience? And it may not be the time to dedicate the time, and that's okay too, right? Because if you buy the book, you don't have to read it all in one sitting, nor do you have to read it in that way the first time. You could read it quickly and then say, I want to bring that on my summer vacation and spend a little time in a specific section.
Yeah.
Go a little bit deeper.
That brings me to asking for the readers of Living by Heart, what's a question or learning or growth you hope that people get from your book?
I hope more than a specific question that they form a practice, something that they do consistently to self-check in, right? How am I doing right now? Or how am I doing today? Kind of practice that we're checking in with ourselves more. Because in this fast-paced world, it's so easy to just get doing. And we never stop to say, how am I actually feeling right now? Am I showing up at the best version of myself that I'd like to be in this busyness? So my hope is that they build a practice from it. If there were one question I'd love readers, including you, Anne, to ask yourself, it would be that self-check-in that just says, what do I need today to feel more harmony within?
Mm.
And I'm putting my hand on my heart because that helps me to ground. But, you could have a hand on your lower belly too, if that kind of gives a centering sense as well. Sometimes I'll do one hand on heart and one hand on my belly and, feet firmly planted, and just sort of even close your eyes and just do a quick check-in. Doesn't need to be a lot of time. What does my whole self need right now? Or what does greater harmony for me look like in this moment?
Mm-hmm.
Which part of my heart practice needs my attention? And so there's a few questions there that are offered. And I really encourage in the book for people to not just use the questions I pose in there, but to find the questions that work best for them. Because often once you start building this practice, you recognize like certain questions someone else gave you, those are nice. But here's the real question that gets me individually connected in
Yeah.
with my whole self.
Oh, I love that idea of really having that go-to question, whatever it is, be it the one that you shared there, and I'm going to try that myself, or finding the one that really resonates with you to do that personal check-in, that self-check-in with what's going on for me, what do I need, what's the information my body is providing me that I can tap into.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've really enjoyed our conversation here together, Heather. How can our audience find and connect with you after this podcast?
Well, I love hearing from people. And so there's a livingbyheart.ca. So living by heart, all one word together.ca is the website to order the book and to get a little more information. And you can also, there's a connect with us section in there if you want to send some questions along or some thoughts along. Always happy to receive them. LinkedIn is the place where I live. I'm Heather Haigh on LinkedIn. My business is Aspiring Growth. Aspiringgrowth.com is where you'll find about my coaching practice and the services that I provide in my coaching business.
All of that will be in the show notes.
Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn through one of the websites. Always love to hear ideas, thoughts, feedback. All feedback is welcome. And it's been really lovely spending some time with you today. Thank you for having me on your show.
So happy to hear kind of the inner workings of what went on around the creation of this book and through it and hear some of your personal experience with it. So thanks so much, Heather.
Thank you.
And I look forward to hearing how our audience interacts with the book as well.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to Books to Better Your Life. If you could use some support on your own personal growth journey, please reach out. I'm an ICF certified life coach, and I help my clients with habits, mindset, confidence, and making what they want happen. I'm Ann Brinkman, and you can find me at www.betteryour.life. That's .life, not .com. Choose the contact option to send me a message and schedule a chat.